name is Jamie Marriott. I covered the National Health Standard 2.8.3, which is for 8th grade, and it is how peers influence health behaviors. So just to give a brief outline of my lesson, the first part is an introduction journal and a think, pair, share. Then students would transition into a situations game, which has them moving around the classroom. After that game, they would do a final journal, which is kind of a reflection activity. And after that, they would work in groups to give a presentation of an example. So for their introductory journal, the first thing that they're going to do, they're going to walk in, they're going to see that there's a journal prompt on the board. They're going to have to think about how their friends and classmates have influenced their behaviors. This should be super, super brief, only like 3 to 5 sentences. They're going to answer the question that's on the screen right now that says, was their influence negative, positive, or none at all? So after they write that down, they kind of explain it, again, really short 3 to 5 sentences. They would turn and talk to a neighbor, that's the think, pair, share, and they're going to give examples of this friend's influence on them. After the introductory journal, they're going to play the situation game, which is kind of a read and respond. So they get in groups, like 3 to 4, it just depends on the size. And they're going to respond with 3 things. They're going to first give their response, their what would you do to the situation. They're going to discuss what influenced them to respond that way. And then they're also going to give an example of what could have possibly changed that response, what could have encouraged a different health behavior out of this. So some examples of these, and these would be scattered around the room at different stations so that students are getting up and moving and working as a group instead of just stationary at their desks, stuck. But some examples of this are you're at a birthday party and a friend or someone brings out a bottle of vodka and your friend takes a swig, it's their birthday, they take a swig, they hand the bottle to you. What do you do? Another one was in the school bathroom, classmate hands you their vape, says, you know what, if you want to hit it, you can. What do you do? Third one down here is your parents leave you home for the weekend and you want to throw a party. You tell your friend about it, they say, hey, that's not a good idea. I'm going to tell your parents. What do you do? And then the final one down here, it's not necessarily a health behavior. This was just an example that I was coming up with, but it does encourage students to think about influence on their behaviors as a whole. And that is, you want to sit down with the popular kids at lunch, and they tell you, you know, you can, but first you have to go knock over your friend's lunch tray. What do you do? After they play the situations game, students will come back down to their desks and they're going to answer 2 questions about their responses to the game. The first question is, how can you use your new knowledge to be a better friend? So was it, you know, you realized that you're listening to your friends, so maybe you need to stand up for yourself more, or you're not listening to your friends and maybe you should because they're trying to lead you in the right direction. And the second question is, do you think that your current friends would be open to change? So this gets them really thinking about themselves and their current friend group and trying to understand if their friends are healthy for them. You know, if these are the friends that are pressuring you to drink or smoke or do anything that's not good for you, if you were to have a conversation with them, would they be open to change? Would they be able to hear you and come at that place from a, you know, come at it with self-reflection of themselves? Or is it, you know, I'm not going to listen to you, I know myself better than you and I don't care what you have to say. So this one would get them more reflecting on their relationships with their peers and understanding if those relationships are good to have, if they're beneficial to them, or at the end of the day, if they are detrimental to their health behaviors, to their mental health, just as a whole. Are they good for you or are they bad? After this final reflection, this would be about a paragraph of a reflection as well, students will come back together into their groups and they're gonna kind of work together and figure out a new example of a peer-influenced health behavior. So like the drinking or the smoking or the throwing a party and you're going to get in trouble. They're going to think about what's a situation that my peers would influence me to have a certain behavior. So they're going to work together as a group. They're going to come up with this example. Then they're going to sit down and think, what are all of the possible ways that someone could respond to this? And they're going to pick 2. And I chose 2 because, there's obviously a clearly good response and a clearly bad response, so I do want students to choose at least like one of each. But there's so many ways and so many different things that can influence how someone was responding in a situation that having at least 2 options gives the students that they're presenting to, they can see both sides of it. The third part of this is to get up as a group, and you can either do a slideshow or a skit. I do think skits would be a little more interactive. That also works with the physical health, that gets them up and moving and doing stuff as opposed to just standing and saying, here's my slideshow. But it does allow students to be a little bit more creative and kind of show their friends if they can't quite articulate what they're trying to say. So as a summary, there are 3 parts to this lesson. The first one is the intro journal and a think, pair, share. So how have you been influenced by your peers? The second one is, of course, the situations game, where students are getting up and walking around to different scenarios and discussing what they would do in those scenarios. And then the third part is the final journal reflection and the example presentation to their peers. So for the active learning part, students are discussing things, so they're not stuck at a desk lecturing or being lectured. They're not just writing, where they can kind of turn their brain off. They are having to put themselves in these situations and share with each other and kind of get that peer-to-peer interaction that helps them stay engaged in the learning the whole time. And then I, as the teacher, would of course monitor for participation, making sure students are taking things seriously and, not goofing around, but also everyone is participating equally, so we don't have a student going, I would respond this way, da 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 da, and talking for 5 minutes, and then another student saying, yeah, okay, same, For the mental health aspect, this is a lot of self-reflection with the journaling, which also encourages critical thinking. So students are able to look at themselves and say, oh, I didn't realize my peers had this much of an influence on me, or I didn't realize my peers had this type of influence on me, maybe that's not good for me. So it causes them to take a look at themselves and think if that's the kind of person they want to be or not. For the physical health, it's nothing crazy, but they are moving to stations, so they're moving their bodies, they're getting some energy out, which again, this is for 8th grade, so getting that energy out in any way possible is so important, because middle schoolers are crazy. They have so much energy and they just need to get up and move sometimes, and usually middle school doesn't really accommodate that. So they are getting up and walking around to different situations, and then for the skit as well, if they wanted to do a skit, they could be a little bit more active. And these are my resources. Thank you.